Greetings in the name of the Most High Yahuwah and His Son Yahusha to the 12 tribes that are scattered abroad. I am Brother Hiram, and in this video I am going to be bringing to you part 1 of the series, which I have entitled, Are We Being Partial in the Torah? Rethinking Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. And in this video, we're going to be dealing with the Torah and the prophets on divorce and remarriage. Now, actually, in this part 1, we're going to deal with the Torah on divorce and remarriage. And then in part 2, we're going to deal with the prophets on divorce and remarriage. And so part 1 and part 2 go together. Why the Torah and the prophets? Man doth not live by bread only, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of Yahuwah doth man live. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 3. The sum of your word is truth, and all your righteous right rulings are forever. Psalm 119, 160, and that's out of the Hallelujah Scriptures. Although there are other writings wherein divorce is mentioned, in this teaching series we will focus on the words that actually came out of the mouth of the Most High on this matter. In this teaching series, we will also strive to include all that the Most High had to say on this matter. So if after watching this series, if you find that I have missed anything that the Most High Himself has said about divorce or divorce and remarriage, feel free to bring that to my attention. The Torah. And Elohim created man in his own image. In the image of Elohim He created him. Male and female He created them. And that's Genesis 1:27 in the Hallelujah Scriptures. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. That's Genesis 2:24 out of the Septuagint. These verses form the basis for the teaching of Yahusha as he declared divorce and remarriage to be adultery. This declaration causes some to say that is against Torah. What many are really saying is that this declaration is against their understanding of one passage in the Torah, namely Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. In order to gain perspective, we will examine what the Torah says about this subject apart from Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. So what we're going to look at first are the priestly regulations. They shall not take a wife that is a whore or profane, neither shall they take a woman put away from her husband, for he is Kodesh unto his Elohim. And that's Leviticus chapter 21, verse 7. It's out of the King James. The put away mentioned here would not make sense if it were merely talking about putting away without a bill of divorce. Putting away as a final step of divorce is what is meant here. Now, the previous series that I did was about put away versus divorce. If you haven't been through that, please go through that, because the statement I just made will make a lot more sense to you if you're not familiar with that issue. But this is definitely talking about divorce here, because if it's a matter of not marrying a woman put away from her husband, if this is talking about being put away without receiving a divorce certificate, then nobody could lawfully marry her. So it wouldn't even be necessary to put that in here if that were the case. A widow or a divorced woman or profane or an harlot, these shall he not take, but he shall take a virgin of his own people to wife. This is verse 14 of the same chapter. But if the priest's daughter be a widow or divorced, and have no child, and is returned unto her father's house, as in her youth, she shall eat of her father's meat, but there shall no stranger eat thereof. Now that's chapter 22, verse 13, out of Leviticus. So what we see from these 3 verses in the Torah is that divorce was a reality in Israel, even before Moshe gave Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. So keep in mind that before we even came into covenant with Yah, we had spent centuries in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. And so when we were in Egypt, we lived like the Egyptians, just like we are in a state of captivity here in America, so we live like the Americans. But in ancient Egypt, if you study this out, what you'll find is that they divorced and remarried, and they had a loose liberal policy of divorce and remarriage in Pharaonic Egypt. People could divorce and remarry for just about any reason. Women were able to divorce their husbands and remarried, and they did use the bill of divorce. And so the idea of giving the bill of divorce and putting a woman out of your house, that was nothing new to us. So this was something that was already going on in Egypt. So this was not something that Moshe taught us to do in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. It was already a reality by that time. And also, being a divorced woman in Israel, it was not a favorable thing. It's not like in modern America, where being a divorced woman, in some cases, you're celebrated. But in ancient Israel, that was not the case. And so, I mean, look at who divorced women are listed with. You know, it's not to take a wife that's a whore or profane or a woman put away from her husband, for he is Kodesh unto his Elohim. So really, it was a reproach in ancient Israel. Now, I realize that sometimes in a divorce, you know, the woman may not be at fault. I mean, it may just be some crazy man. It may be some hard-hearted man. He just puts a woman out like that. But nonetheless, I mean, whether a woman was innocent or guilty, this was an unfavorable predicament to be in ancient Israel. Now, what we're going to look at here is the situation where a man accuses a virgin of Israel of not being a maid when he marries her, and it's found that his accusation is false. And so in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 19, it says, "And they shall immerse him in 100 shekels of silver, and give them unto the father of the damsel, because he hath brought up an evil name upon a virgin of Israel, and she shall be his wife. He may not put her away all his days." Now, this next situation is where a man lays with a virgin, takes her virginity while she's in her father's house. And it says, "Then the man that lay with her shall give unto the damsel's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he hath humbled her. He may not put her away all his days." And that's from verse 29. Here are 2 occasions wherein the Most High enforced his creational universal marriage law. The mercy that men and women receive through the Mosaic allowance for divorce was not given to these 2 men. And so what I mean by that is that divorce, and even divorce and remarriage, Yah let that slide. He let it slide. He suffered it. He tolerated it. But in these 2 cases, he did not let it slide. He did not tolerate it. He enforced his creational, universal marriage law, that this was permanent for both of these men here. And so, yes, it would be somewhat of a punishment that they didn't receive the mercy that other people did. But at the same time, that's Yah's will. Marriage permanence is Yah's will, and we see him enforcing it 2 different times here in the Torah. From this we see that Genesis 1:27 and Genesis 2:24 is not just an unenforceable ideal to be admired. And I say this because if you study this subject and you hear what Christian preachers and teachers have to say, and even messianic rabbis, they will say that this creational universal marriage law, they'll say that it's the ideal. Yes, it's the ideal, but because of the reality of sin, then Yah understands. Yah understands that because of the reality of sin, there's going to be divorce, and there's going to be divorce and remarriage. And so it's an ideal, but it's not an ideal that he holds us to. That's how most people believe about this. It's just an unenforceable ideal to be admired. Now, let me interject something here. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 16, and this is part of the curse on Hawa, the curse on Eve. He said, "Thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee." Now, us as Israelite men, we stand firm on that. So we believe in that. We believe that that is rock solid. We believe that that is immovable. But can you imagine if our wives began to say that, well, that's the ideal. That's the ideal that the man rule over the woman. But because of the reality of sin, Yah's okay if a woman doesn't submit in all things. She submits in some things, but not in all things. Yah understands because of the reality of sin. Now, how would we take that? You see? So how is it that we hold so tightly to that decree of Yah, but we hang on so loosely to this creational universal marriage law? A man shall leave father and mother and cleave to his wife. They two shall be one flesh. So that should be as rock solid in our minds as thy desire shall be to thy husband. He shall rule over thee. I mean, a shall is a shall, right? Examples of the Most High having laws in place that he, out of his mercy, did not fully enforce. Now, I'm going to bring these things out here because some of you are going to have a problem with the idea of the Most High having laws but not really enforcing them. Me talking about this creational universal law of marriage, but he didn't fully enforce it. And what I want to show you here is that that's not out of step with the character of the Most High, that he does do that sometimes. And Solomon loved Yahuwah, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and burnt incense in high places. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. 1,000 burnt offerings did Solomon offer upon that altar. In Gibeon, Yahuwah appeared to Solomon in a dream by night. And Elohim said, "Ask what I shall give thee." This is 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 3 through 5. Now the Torah says, "Take heed to thyself that thou offer not thy burnt offerings in every place that thou seest, but in the place which Yahuwah shall choose in one of thy tribes, there thou shalt offer thy burnt offerings, and there thou shalt do all that I command thee." That's Deuteronomy chapter 12, verses 13 and 14. And so here we have Shlomo transgressing the Torah. And what does Yah do? Does Yah zap him? No. He shows up to him in a dream by night and says, "Ask what I shall give thee." And so as far as offering in the place where his name shall be called, no, the house of Yah wasn't built yet, but there was a place. They had a tabernacle. They did have a proper place to offer. Because you remember how he had Joab being taken from the horns of the altar. I believe it was Benaiah that came and slayed him. Okay, and so Shlomo knew there was a proper place to offer unto Yahuwah, but here he is on a high place, transgressing the Torah, offering unto Yah, and Yah shows up and says, "Ask what I shall give thee." So this is a good example of Yah having a law in place, but out of his mercy, not fully enforcing it. He mentioned it up here. If you read that again, it said only he sacrificed and burned incense in high places. So it's mentioned there, but we don't see Yah dealing with that. And all the congregation of them that were come again out of the captivity made booths, and sat under the booths, for since the days of Yahusha son of Nun unto that day, had not the children of Israel done so, and there was very great gladness. Now that's Nehemiah chapter 8, verse 17. It's talking about when our forefathers came out of the Babylonian captivity and how they kept the festival of Sukkot as it is written. And here it says that for since the days of Yahusha son of Nun unto that day, the children of Israel had not done so. So think about all the righteous kings, all the righteous prophets, all the righteous people that have been mentioned in that time frame. And they were still counted righteous. Even though they didn't dwell in booths like Yah says to do during the festival of Sukkot. Look at this. You are to dwell in booths for 7 days. All the native born of Israel shall dwell in booths, so that your descendants may know that I made the Israelites dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am Yahuwah your Elohim. That is Leviticus chapter 23, verses 42 and 43. So this is another example of Yah having a law in place, but out of his mercy, he did not fully enforce. So no, it is not out of step with Yah's character to have a law in place that he doesn't fully enforce. To be continued in part 2.